Hana Park stared out the viewport as the transport ship approached the Galactic Academy. The massive structure floated in space, rings of study halls and research domes spinning gently around the central administration spire. At 12 years old, she was the youngest human ever admitted to the prestigious institution. "Nervous?" asked her father, squeezing her shoulder. Hana nodded, clutching her acceptance letter. She had scored higher on the entrance exams than applicants 3 times her age. The letter called her a remarkable human specimen, not exactly warm, but she understood. Humans were newcomers to the galactic community. The docking procedure completed with a soft hiss. When the doors opened, they were greeted by a tall, slender figure with smooth blue skin. "Welcome to the Academy. I am Professor Day," he said, bowing slightly. "I will be Hana's academic advisor." As they walked through gleaming hallways, Hana noticed other students watching her. Some whispered behind their hands or whatever passed, for hands in their species. "Don't mind them," Professor Day said quietly. "Many have never seen a human child before. You are something of a curiosity." Hana's quarters were small but comfortable. After her parents left, fighting tears, she arranged her few possessions and reviewed her class schedule on her datapad. Her first week passed in a blur of new information. The Academy taught sciences humans hadn't even named yet. Hana absorbed everything eagerly, staying up late to study additional materials. While most students were polite, few were friendly. Humans were considered primitive, their planet only recently discovered by galactic explorers. In her quantum theory class, Hana met Suk, a third-year student from the Century system who actually smiled at her. "Your calculations are impressive," Suk said after class. "Most first-years can't solve multidimensional equations so quickly." They began studying together. Suk explained Academy politics and introduced Hana to other open-minded students. For the first time, Hana felt less alone. 3 months into the term, Professor Day called Hana to his office. "Your progress is remarkable," he said. "I believe you're ready for independent research." Hana couldn't believe her luck. First years rarely got research opportunities. She chose to study energy transfer across different dimensional planes, a topic even senior researchers found challenging. Her project advanced quickly. Late one night in the lab, Hana made a breakthrough, developing an equation that could potentially revolutionize spacecraft propulsion. She carefully documented her findings and secured them in the Academy database before heading to bed, exhausted but thrilled. The next morning, alarms blared throughout the research wing. Hana rushed to her lab to find emergency teams in protective gear surrounding her equipment. "What's happening?" she asked Suk, who had appeared beside her. "There was an energy surge from your lab. They're saying it nearly caused a breach in the Academy's shields." "That's impossible," Hana protested. "My equipment was powered down." Security officers escorted her to a small waiting room. Hours passed. Before Professor Day arrived, his expression grave. "The Disciplinary Council has reviewed the incident," he said. "The data shows your experiment was modified to run an unauthorized power sequence." "I didn't do that," Hana insisted. "Someone must have accessed my work overnight." "The logs show your credentials were used," he replied softly. "And the Council has concerns about the direction of your research. They believe it violates safety protocols." 2 days later, Hana stood before the Council, 7 stern faces from different species looking down at her. Administrator Toll, the head of the Council, read the charges in a flat voice. Reckless endangerment. Unauthorized research pathways. Violations of energy containment protocols. Hana tried to defend herself, explaining that someone must have sabotaged her work, but her voice shook too much to be convincing. "The evidence is conclusive," Administrator Toll announced. "Hana Park is hereby expelled from the Galactic Academy." As security personnel approached to escort her out, Hana caught sight of Jin, a senior student who had often questioned why a human child was admitted to the Academy. He was watching from the back of the room, a small smile on his face. "Professor." Day walked with her to the transport dock, breaking protocol to carry one of her bags. "This is wrong," he whispered. "Your equations were brilliant. Too brilliant, perhaps. You threatened established theories, and some here fear change. As the transport doors closed, Hana pressed her palm against the window. Tears streamed down her face, but her eyes hardened with determination. "I'll be back," she promised. "Someday I'll show them what humans can really do." The rain on Kital Station never stopped. It wasn't real rain, just recycled water that flowed through the station's outer shell to cool its aging systems. But it created a constant patter that reminded Hana of her childhood on Earth. At 32, she had spent nearly 2 decades away from her home planet and longer still from the hallowed halls of the Galactic Academy. "Dr. Park, the analysis is complete," said Tay, her assistant of 5 years. The young researcher had found Hana after reading her controversial papers published under a false name. Despite being warned that working with the disgraced human scientist might damage his career, Tay had stayed. Hana looked up from her calculations. Her small lab was crowded with equipment salvaged from decommissioned research vessels and modified with techniques learned from fringe scientists across the galaxy. "Show me," she said, pushing aside a cold cup of tea. The holographic display flickered to life, showing a web of red lines spreading across star charts. "The disruptions are following exactly the pattern you predicted," Tay said, his voice tight with concern. 3 more shipping routes reported navigation failures yesterday. Hana nodded grimly. For years, she had tracked subtle changes in the fabric of space that the Academy and other official institutions dismissed as random anomalies. But she knew better. The patterns were unmistakable to anyone willing to look beyond conventional wisdom. "How long before it reaches major population centers?" she asked. "At current rates of expansion, less than 8 months. The door to the lab slid open with a squeak. June, a veteran cargo pilot who smuggled scientific equipment for Hana, entered shaking water from his coat. "Your old friend June sent a message," he said, handing her a secure data chip. "Said it couldn't wait." Hana inserted the chip into her personal reader, her heart beating faster. June had been a maintenance worker at the Academy when she was expelled. Now he worked in communications and secretly passed her information about Academy research. Tiara's message was brief. "They know something is wrong but are looking in the wrong place. Admiral Q has been asking questions about your old research. Time to come out of hiding." Hana closed her eyes. Admiral Q had been a junior officer when she was at the Academy, one of the few who had treated her with respect. If he was connecting the current anomalies to her work from 20 years ago, perhaps someone at the Academy was finally ready to listen. "Tay, start packing the essential equipment," she said. "Jun, we need transport to Centrum Prime." Jun whistled. "The Academy Central World? That's risky? Your face is probably still on their security alerts." "It's been 20 years, Hana replied, "and we don't have a choice anymore." That night, Hana pulled out an old box she kept under her bed. Inside was her Academy acceptance letter, now yellow with age, and a small hologram of her 12-year-old self, standing proudly in her student uniform. She activated another item, a recorded message from Professor Day sent 5 years after her expulsion. His blue face appeared, looking older than she remembered. "Hana, I continue to follow your work through unofficial channels. Your theories on cross-dimensional energy flows are years ahead of current Academy thinking. I regret that I could not prevent what happened, but know that some of us still believe in you. When the time is right, the truth will matter more than politics." Professor Day had died 3 years after sending that message. He never saw how Hana had developed her theories while working on distant worlds, learning from species that the Academy considered too primitive for serious scientific contribution. 2 weeks later, Hana, Tai, and their essential equipment were aboard Jun's cargo ship, approaching the gleaming rings of the Galactic Academy. Hana stood at the viewport, remembering her first arrival as an excited child. "Will they listen?" Tai asked, standing beside her. "Probably not at first," Hana admitted. "The Academy doesn't admit mistakes easily. But the data won't lie forever. The spatial rifts are growing faster than they can explain with conventional theories. As the ship began docking procedures, a transmission came through. Unscheduled cargo vessel, identify yourself and state your business. Hana took a deep breath and stepped to the communication panel. This is Dr. Hana Park, requesting permission to meet with Admiral Q on urgent scientific business. A long silence followed before the controller responded, sounding confused. Dr. Park? The human student who was— Yes, Hana interrupted. The one who was expelled 20 years ago. Please inform Admiral Q that I have information about the spatial anomalies affecting the outer systems, and tell him I was right all along. The lights of the academy glittered before her, both beautiful and intimidating. Hana straightened her shoulders. She wasn't a child anymore, and this time, they would have to listen. The gleaming spires of the Galactic Academy stood tall against the purple sky of Centrum Prime, just as Hana remembered from her childhood. She had dreamed of these buildings thousands of times over the past 20 years, sometimes with longing, sometimes with anger, but always with the certainty that she would return. Hana, Tae, and Jun were escorted from the docking bay by 4 security officers wearing the silver uniforms of the Academy Guard. Students hurried past, stealing curious glances at the strange group. Hana noticed how the younger students moved aside, their eyes widening at the security detail. They act like we're dangerous, Tae whispered. To the Academy, we are, Hana replied. Ideas that challenge the established order always are. They were led to a small, plain waiting room near the administrative sector. After 30 minutes, the door slid open to reveal a tall, dignified man in an admiral's uniform. Despite his advanced age, Admiral Kyu stood straight, his eyes sharp and alert. Dr. Park, he said, offering a formal bow. It has been a long time. Hana returned the bow. Admiral, thank you for agreeing to see me. I must admit, your message caught many people by surprise. The Academy doesn't often receive visits from former students who were removed from the program. Expelled, Hana corrected. Let's not pretend it was anything else. The Admiral nodded slightly. Walk with me. They moved through corridors that were both familiar and strange to Hana. The basic structure was the same, but new technologies had been integrated throughout the Academy. Holographic displays showed current research projects and student achievements. Your work on spatial anomalies has been noted, Admiral Q said as they walked, though few here would publicly acknowledge reading papers published by Hana Park. I'm aware. That's why I used different names for most of my research. The Admiral raised an eyebrow. Yes, we suspected as much. The theories published by Dr. Sun and Dr. Yoon showed certain similarities to your early work. Hana allowed herself a small smile. And yet no one connected the dots until the anomalies started affecting shipping lanes. They entered a large observation deck overlooking one of the Academy's massive research domes below. Scientists moved between workstations filled with complex equipment. 3 months ago, we lost contact with Research Outpost 17 in the Kandar sector, Admiral Q said quietly. A week later, 2 transport ships disappeared in the same region. The official explanation is a localized disruption in hyperspace navigation systems. But you don't believe that, Hana said. No. The patterns match too closely with the theoretical models you developed before your departure. That's why I convinced the Council to grant you temporary access. A door at the far end of the observation deck opened, and a group of senior researchers entered. At their head was a face Hana recognized instantly, Jin, her former classmate, and now, judging by the insignia on his uniform, the Academy's chief scientist. Jin stopped abruptly when he saw her. What is she doing here? Dr. Park has been invited. To consult on the spatial anomalies, Admiral Q replied calmly. This is outrageous, Jin said, his voice tight. The Council can't seriously be considering the theories of an expelled student with no formal qualifications. Hana stepped forward. My work has been published in the Universal Scientific Archive, under various names. You've cited my research in your own papers, Jin. You just didn't know it was mine. Jin's face flushed. "Admiral, this is highly irregular." "These are irregular times," the Admiral replied. "Dr. Park will be working in Research Dome 7 away from sensitive projects. She has been granted limited access only." Before Jin could protest further, alarms began to sound throughout the complex. The holographic displays flickered and changed to show emergency alerts. A young assistant rushed into the room. "Chief Scientist, we've lost contact with the Mira system. All communication channels are down." Jin turned to his team. "Prepare the main lab. I want full analysis of the disruption pattern." He glanced at Hana with obvious distaste. "This discussion isn't over, Admiral." As Jin and his team hurried away, Admiral Q turned to Hana. "The anomalies are spreading faster than our models predicted. How much time do we have?" "Less than you think," Hana replied. "The rifts aren't just affecting communications. They're changing the fundamental structure of space in those regions. If they continue to grow at the current rate, major populated systems will be affected within weeks, not months." Admiral Q nodded grimly. "Then we have no choice. Despite objections, you'll have access to the data you need. Research Dome 7 is yours." As they walked toward the research dome, students and staff stopped to stare at Hana. She heard whispers following her. "That's her, the human who was expelled. The Park Prodigy." Tay leaned close. "Are you sure about this? They don't exactly seem welcoming." Hana's expression hardened as she caught sight of Administrator Toll, now much older but still recognizable, watching her from a distance. The same administrator who had pronounced her expulsion 20 years ago. "They don't need to welcome me," she said. "They just need to listen before it's too late." Research Dome 7 hummed with activity as Hana directed a team of scientists who just days earlier had doubted her very presence at the academy. Emergency lights cast everything in a reddish glow, matching the urgency of their work. "The latest readings from the Cora sector," said Tay, transferring data to the main display. The holographic map showed angry red fissures spreading through previously stable regions of space. Hana studied the patterns, adjusting calculations on her personal device. For 3 days straight, she had worked with minimal rest, fueled by determination and the bittersweetness of validation. The crisis was unfolding exactly as she had predicted in her research that the Academy had once condemned. Dr. Park called a junior researcher. The stabilization field failed again. The dimensional variance is too strong for conventional containment. Before Hana could respond, the doors to the research dome slid open. Chief Scientist Jin entered, looking haggard after days without sleep. Behind him walked Administrator Toll, still imposing despite his advanced age. "The Council demands an update," Jin said without greeting. 3 more systems have lost all hyperspace access. Millions are effectively stranded." Hana gestured to her team to continue working. "The conventional approach isn't working because you're trying to force stability using outdated models," she explained. "These aren't simple navigational disruptions. The fabric of space itself is changing." Administrator Toll's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of irritation she remembered from her childhood. "Explain in terms the Council will understand. What is causing this and how do we stop it?" Hana activated a simplified display. "Think of space like fabric. For centuries, we've been pulling on different areas through hyperspace jumps, quantum communications, and energy transfers. We thought space was infinitely flexible, but it's not. Now it's tearing." Jin crossed his arms. "And you believe you can repair these tears?" "Not repair. Stabilize," Hana corrected. "My team has developed a method to create dimensional anchors that will prevent further expansion of the rifts. But we need access to the Academy's quantum array to generate enough power." Administrator Toll shook his head. "The quantum array powers critical Academy systems. Diverting it is out of the question." At that moment, alarms blared again, louder than before. One of Jin's assistants rushed in, panic clear on his face. "Sir, a rift has opened in the Centrum system. Projections show it will reach Academy space within hours." The news silenced everyone. Centrum Prime was the heart of galactic civilization, home to the Academy and billions of inhabitants. If the rifts reached here, Nowhere was safe. Jin looked at Hana, his former arrogance replaced by grim necessity. Show me your solution. Hours later, the massive quantum array at the heart of the academy had been reconfigured according to Hana's specifications. Scientists and engineers worked frantically to prepare the dimensional anchors, devices Hana had designed years earlier while working in her small lab on Kital Station. The closest rift is now just 30 minutes from Academy orbit, reported Admiral Q, who had joined them in the main control room. All non-essential personnel have been evacuated to the inner rings. Hana checked the final calculations. The anchors need to be precisely positioned at these coordinates. She highlighted points on the map. We'll need Academy ships to deploy them. Already arranged, said Admiral Q. But someone needs to coordinate the energy pulse from the quantum array. The timing must be exact. I'll do it, Hana said quietly. Jin looked up sharply. The neural interface for the quantum array wasn't designed for human physiology. The strain could cause permanent damage. Do you have a better option? Hana asked. When no one answered, she continued, I've studied the array's specifications. I can handle it. As technicians prepared the neural interface, Admiral Q approached Hana. 20 years ago, I spoke against your expulsion, though I didn't have the rank to stop it. I always believed the Academy made a terrible mistake that day. Hana nodded, allowing herself a small smile. Let's make sure the Academy survives long enough to admit it. The neural interface chamber was small and stark. Hana sat in the control chair as technicians attached sensors to her temples and spine. Through the window she could see the main control room where Jin, Admiral Q, and even Administrator Toll watched anxiously. Dimensional anchors are in position. Tay's voice came through the communication system. Ready on your command? Hana closed her eyes as the neural interface activated. Suddenly she could feel the quantum array as if it were part of her own body. A vast pulsing network of energy. Beyond that, she sensed the approaching rifts, tears in reality that threatened everything. Initiating dimensional stabilization, she said, her voice steady despite the pain beginning to build behind her eyes. Synchronizing anchors now. As Hana directed the massive energies of the quantum array, images flashed through her mind. Her 12-year-old self, standing before the disciplinary council, years of work in distant outposts, the faces of those who had believed in her when the Academy did not. The pain intensified as she pushed the interface beyond its designed limits. On the monitors, the anchor points glowed as they activated, creating a web of stabilizing energy around the Academy and outward through the Centrum system. It's working, someone shouted in the control room. The rifts are slowing. Hana barely heard them as she maintained her focus, channeling more power to the areas where the fabric of space was weakest. She had one chance to make this right, not just for herself, but for every inhabited world threatened by the crisis. As consciousness began to slip away, Hana had one final satisfying thought. They would have to believe her now. Bright light filtered through the windows of the medical bay, warming Hana's face as she slowly opened her eyes. It had been 3 weeks since she had activated the dimensional anchors and saved the Academy, along with billions of lives throughout the Centrum system. Good morning, Professor Park, said the medical technician, adjusting the monitors beside her bed. Hana blinked in confusion. Professor? Before the technician could answer, the door slid open. Admiral Q entered, followed by Tay, who carried a small bundle wrapped in ceremonial cloth. It's good to see you awake, said the Admiral. The neural strain was significant. The doctors weren't certain when you would recover consciousness. Hana tried to sit up, wincing at the stiffness in her body. The anchors, did they hold? Perfectly, Tay answered, unable to hide his pride. The rifts have stabilized across all affected systems. Your theory was correct in every detail. Admiral Q nodded. The Academy Council met yesterday. They voted unanimously to offer you a full professorship and establish a new research department under your direction. He smiled slightly. Even Administrator Toll voted in favor, though I suspect it pained him greatly. Hana shook her head in disbelief. 20 years of exile, of working in the shadows, and now this sudden reversal. Why the change of heart? Saving billions of lives tends to change perspectives, the Admiral replied dryly. And your published work, under all those different names, has become impossible to ignore. Half the recent advances in theoretical physics built on foundations you created. Tay stepped forward and unfolded the bundle he carried. Inside was an academy professor's robe, deep blue with silver trim. They announced your appointment this morning. You're the youngest full professor in academy history. 3 days later, Hana stood outside her newly assigned lecture hall. Her legs still felt weak from her long recovery, but she had refused to delay her first class. Inside, students from dozens of species waited, many more than the course had originally registered. She took a deep breath and entered. The hall fell silent as she walked to the central platform. Faces turned toward her with expressions ranging from curiosity to awe. In the back row, she noticed Admiral Q and, surprisingly, Chief Scientist Jin. Welcome to Interdimensional Theory and Application, Hana began. I'm Professor Park. Some of you may have heard stories about me. A ripple of laughter moved through the room. Her return had become something of a legend throughout the academy. For too long, the scientific community has separated disciplines that should work together. My department will focus on breaking down those barriers. As Hana spoke, she noticed a young human girl sitting in the front row, perhaps 16 years, old, taking detailed notes. Something about her intense focus reminded Hana of herself at that age. After class, as students filed out, many stopping to introduce themselves, the young human girl approached hesitantly. Professor Park, I'm Sue. I've read all your papers. I mean all the papers now attributed to you. Your work on cross-dimensional energy transfers changed how I understand physics. Hana smiled. Are you finding the academy welcoming? Sue looked down. Not always. Some professors still say humans lack the mental capacity for advanced theoretical sciences. One suggested I switch to applied engineering. And what did you tell them? That I would prove them wrong, Sue replied, her voice strengthening. Just like you did. Later that evening, Hana walked through the central gardens of the academy. New memorial stones had been added, honoring those lost in the spatial crisis. Among them was a tribute to Professor Day, her old mentor. He would be proud, said a voice behind her. Chief Scientist Jin approached, looking uncomfortable. Yes, he would, Hana agreed, surprised by Jin's presence. Jin hesitated before speaking again. 20 years ago, I accessed your research project and altered the results. His admission hung in the air between them. I was jealous. A human child shouldn't have been able to outthink the rest of us. And now? Hana asked quietly. Now I understand that science doesn't care about species or age or academy politics. Your theories saved us all. He bowed formally. The Council has approved your request to review your original expulsion. The records will be corrected. After Jin left, Hana remained in the garden, watching the 3 moons of Centrum Prime rise above the academy spires. A small plaque had been installed near the entrance. Park Interdisciplinary Research Center. Opening next term. The next morning, Hana met with her first graduate research team. Sue was among them, along with students from 7 different species, including some the academy had previously considered too developmentally limited for advanced studies. Today we begin something new, Hana told them, opening the doors to her laboratory. Unlike the sterile, compartmentalized labs throughout the academy, hers was designed with open workspaces where different disciplines could merge and collaborate. The old academy taught us to stay in our lanes, to respect boundaries between fields of study, she continued. But the universe doesn't recognize those boundaries. Neither will we. As her students took their places, eager to begin, Hana glanced out the viewport at the stars beyond. Somewhere out there, the dimensional anchors she had designed continued their work, stabilizing the fabric of space. Just as she, after 20 years in exile, had finally found her place in the universe.